Neurodivergent Moms, the podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Neurodivergent Moms, the podcast. Today I'm with Evaleen. Hi, how are you, Evaleen?
Hi, Sabrina. Thanks for having me. Really looking forward to chatting.
Thank you so much for coming. It's lovely to having you here. So, yes, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am Irish. I'm autistic. I found out I was autistic 10 years ago, and I suppose very quickly realized that the information that I was getting was very outdated and very depressing and very ableist and not led by autistics. And I suppose the more I connected with other autistic people and was reading current research, I realized that this is kind of ridiculous that everyone else doesn't have access to this information. So I suppose that, and not just that, but I suppose just realizing that I just did not know the abuse that was going on in the autistic community and also in the wider disabled community.
Yes.
I think that that's really what got me into doing this kind of advocacy work. And I suppose it just developed naturally then over time into Ausome Training, which is, I suppose, autistic-led neurodiversity training provider, whatever words you want to.
Yeah, it is great. We're going to talk about it later, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's really, really good. So, can you just tell us about a little bit about your, diagnosis process? Like how was it?
Yeah, I suppose it's not a surprise, is it? I think any of us that go in adulthood, it's like you start, and I can't even remember exactly like what triggered
Uh-huh.
all the thoughts, because I had looked at autism before. I worked with kids for 20 years, and you'd hear descriptions of autistic kids, and they never sounded
Yeah.
like me. But then I was like, oh, I'm like a fussy eater or a picky eater. Oh, I'm like sensitive to these things, and I'm like, and then you start wondering about these things, and again, if you were you'd look for information, but it was just like this list of like childhood behaviors or deficits, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see myself in that. So I don't know what I came across first or anything like that, but it was just kind of like literally searching and searching, and then just like coming across stories, I think, from autistic women, like autistic women sharing their experiences. And I
Yeah.
think it was just like light bulbs going off in my head and go say, oh, there I am. That's me. That's me. Oh, that's, the whole Me Too thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And I suppose then just, yeah, thinking at the time, oh, I had to get like something formal to confirm this, like, whereas now I'd have a different, I suppose, opinion on all of that. Would be quite reasonable to just self-identify. But yeah, so I suppose that was, I suppose that was it. It was a long time ago. It was also, I mean, it, as I said, it wasn't a surprise, but then it's kind of a relief or something,
Mm-hmm.
and I know I'm not alone saying that. But then there comes this weird roller coaster period afterwards. It was like, I remember just being like on a high for a few days, and then it was like, boom. Oh my God, I have to like now reframe my whole life. I have to, and obviously because I'm autistic, I'm going to go back over everything in minute detail. And just kind of realizing that I've, lived a life of oppression, which was a new thought to me. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, how can you grow up kind of, you know, othered in this way and not even know it? There was just so much to dismantle. Yeah, it was a really I suppose I'm still dismantling it like 10 years on.
Definitely. I feel like I want to call it like, there's a period of, grieving. Like you think, oh, what happened with my life? Like, what was going to be different back then if I knew. Yeah, you go through all this period about, yeah, I went
Yeah,
through the same, like going into, every year of your life and just reliving and everything. And
yeah. Like what if I'd known sooner? But then I suppose I just had to put things in perspective because that thinking, while helpful maybe at the time, continuing like that isn't helpful. It wasn't, well, for me anyway. And I suppose I had to look and kind of look at and realize that, well, all these life experiences, positive or not,
Mm-hmm.
have led me to where I am today. They've made me who I am.
Definitely, yeah.
And I think that's where I found that nice place then, was like, yeah, you've had something that could have been a lot better had you known. But then also, if I had been identified as a child, I might have been subjected to all sorts of,
Mm-hmm.
things like ABA and all sorts of things, because they would have been coming into Ireland even probably, well, maybe not, maybe, but yeah, back then. But, so we don't know. And I suppose at some point I just went, this is not serving me to be raking over my past in my new self. I need to look at where I am now. And I was happy with where I was. And that was, I suppose that's where the journey begun then, and how I can change things for others as well.
So yeah, I was going to ask you that, like, what was, what impact had in your life knowing, and what changes have you made after learning about your neurotype?
Yeah, everything has changed. Like, I'm not the same person I was before I realized I was autistic. Because I suppose with that came a realization of how much masking and obviously protecting myself and masking I was doing. And, in order to kind of find myself again or reconnect, it was like having to let go of all of these things that I realized I don't care about. Like, loads of things that I thought were really important in my life actually weren't. So it was really like stripping back, I think. And just, yeah, like that kind of reconnecting to my own self, or my instincts, or my gut, or whatever way you want to call it, or
Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, what did you ask me? I kind of went,
Yeah, I ask you, like, what changes have you made in your
oh
life after
yeah.
knowing that you were autistic?
Yes, I mean, like, that, my whole outlook, and I think my perspective, like, and also I suppose, like, I had to, like, address my own ableism,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I didn't even know what ableism was. I was like, what is this? And then, like, realizing what it is, and then realizing, oh my, I do this, and then, because I suppose I got involved in, like, advocacy kind of like really early on. I was just learning from other people all the time, and I had to, and everything I saw was, having to obviously recognize that as a problem in our society, and go, well, if it's affecting me. And then I suppose stripping that back again, and yeah, I probably had lived a sheltered life, I think, up until then. I was like, I didn't know half what was going on in the world. Yeah, it's just, yeah, my entire outlook, and who I am, and how I am, and how I see other people, I think, is probably the biggest change. Just meeting other people with a lot more understanding, and, even getting to points where I just removing that judgment.
Yeah.
Like, that's, and recognizing that that's literally all we're doing. We're all just judging each other for no reason. Like, only just, because that's what we've been conditioned to do. Yeah, so I think, like, that's and it's been hard, I think, at times. Um, just trying to make the right decision. There was just so much thinking going into, if I do this, is this like being a victim of capitalism? If I do this, like, even just like wearing makeup, and I was like, this is just like a sign of oppression of women. Why am I? And there's
Questioning everything.
everything, and this big debate going on in my head. And then I just had to go to the point: if you feel like putting on makeup, just put it on. If you don't. But there was just so much going on, and I think that hangover of perfectionism, that nice trauma response that a lot of us have, I was like, now I have to be the perfect, like, unmasked person, or the perfect advocate, or the live my life perfectly, which you actually can't do in this world. I
And be the
realize.
perfect parent. And
Yeah,
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 there's
yeah.
always this need for perfection, and
Mm,
there's always the burden of being the best at no matter what you do. Yeah.
mhm.
And do you recall feeling different when you were a child?
Oh yeah, see, that question always gets me, because I'm like, well, we're all different. And I don't mean that like take it literally. It's like, we are, and I suppose for me it's important that, like, Not so much that I'm different. I was treated differently, or people responded differently to me. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because we are all different. It's how
Yeah.
other people respond to some differences rather than others that's different. Um, so yeah, and I suppose it's you put things down to other reasons, oh,
Uh-huh.
middle child. Oh, I was like that because I was the middle child, or I was like this because I like went to school outside my like immediate neighborhood, or and I was coming from the outside. So there was all these other reasons and all these other things. And then you realize, yeah, all those things plus, you're also autistic. Yeah. So yeah, I suppose it's just things. I mean, for me, eating has always been a big thing. So
Hmm.
it's so lovely now that people have more awareness. Like, people aren't, I mean, people still make comments, like still, you
Yeah.
know. Not so much now as an adult when I go to the restaurant, but like, I was just actually passing some teenagers there recently, and I don't know, they were going for a burger, and obviously one of them was talking about, and they were like, "Oh, you only eat a plain burger," and they did that, and this big discussion about like what the other person ate, and I was just like, it's these little tiny things
Yeah.
that you're kind of listening to all the time, like you're some strange other creature because you don't do exactly what everyone else is doing.
Well, imagine that plus being vegetarian. So you
Oh
need
yeah.
you need to explain why you're vegetarian, why you're, a picky eater, and it's a whole thing. I've been explaining myself all my life.
Oh my God, it's exhausting, isn't it?
It is exhausting and it makes you question yourself and you're like, I'm just doing what I feel is right for me, why so hard? Why do I need to explain so much?
Yeah, but I mean, I have been in situations where, like that, you might go to a friend's house for something. I don't know, like say they're having a bit of a party or a get together or something, and it's like there would be a vegetarian option, but then they'd know I don't eat all these other things. But it was just like, it was like nearly, that doesn't matter because I was making a choice for something, or it was like, people thinking you're looking for attention, or I remember at one point my mom was fabulous, but like at one point she was, I don't think you like yourself very much if you're not eating, things that are good for you, and all those things
Yeah.
play around in your head. And it's just like, rather than just accepting, this is just how somebody is. And that's just one thing, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
It is one thing. And then, as you said, obviously we are all different and all the children are different in that. But like I remember doing a lot of masking
Mm.
because even though, even though now as an adult, the majority of my friends are neurodivergent, which I don't think it's a coincidence. But back then, I remember trying to push myself into liking the same music that everybody were listening to, or trying to be interested in the same things and trying to hide my true interests. Because I remember one time they called me like "Oh, you are like you are old. You look like an old person with all those, the music that you like and what you're listening to." And I felt, you know it really hurt me. So I remember doing a lot of masking in terms of that.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, yeah, there's the deliberate, I mean, there's the kind of conscious masking part of masking, and then there's the totally like bits we don't even remember we started doing it so early on just to protect ourselves. But yeah, I mean, I would have like you'd be, I mean, for me, it was music, I think it was a big one. It was
Hmm.
like I used to love collecting CDs, but like very little of it was music I actually liked. It was all like, well, this is what this friend likes. Like I would have had nearly different clothes to be going. You know what I mean? If it was I was going out with these friends, I'd go to this place and I'd wear these clothes. And then if I was going out with someone else, and that's when I was a bit older, I suppose. Um, yeah, I think as a kid, it's just even the thinking about stuff or the questions that you ask, or
Yeah.
like for me, I would have been like I know loads of autistic people have like bad experiences in school. I actually really loved my primary school. I had like really lovely teachers. I think I probably had some autistic teachers, and the way they taught just really, worked for me. It probably
You were
didn't work
so
for,
lucky.
yeah, I know. It's like, I think for other people it might not have worked even in the same class, but just yeah, my own experience was, yeah, I remember having a teacher for 3 years, and oh, you know, if she was teaching us a new word, she'd like go back to the Latin root, and then she'd go, and what other words are related to this? So I was like, whoa,
Wow.
like I can now pick words and see the relationships and things. And it was just, yeah, that kind of, you know, that and just allowing us that space to question and to do, you know, project work and stuff like that. And but I did well in school. The system suited whatever way I could perform. So then of course it was like, well, you're a SWAT, or a SWAT was the word, we like a nerd kind of a thing. So then you try and hide that. You're
Yeah.
like, well, I'm not going to be like that anymore. I remember distinctly when I finished primary school, going into secondary school, like going, I'm not going to be the same person in secondary school. I'm going to like be this other person and trying to be cool. And then I think that's one of the things I realized once in adulthood, and I found out I was autistic. I was like, you're not cool. You are a big nerd. And I think that's what I've like enjoyed embracing, and like just, yeah, you know, kind of like I love learning. I love like information. I
Yeah.
get really excited about stuff. And meeting other people and just talking about that, not, you know, just actually talking about the love of just, yeah, learning and expanding, you know, and then, yeah, so there was, I suppose, yeah, there was, I mean, the longer we talk, the longer the more I'd remember things that I hate from people, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I remember the same. I have this picture of, I don't remember much my childhood. Hello, trauma.
Yeah, I know. I was like,
But I have these like very vivid memory of myself, like just raising my hand, answering all the questions. And I remember how some of the other girls in the class were looking at me, and then during break, they kept asking me like, why were you so eager to answer questions? Why were you keep asking? And then I remember being at home and thinking, ooh, maybe I need to stop doing this because you know, they're not gonna include me in the birthday parties. I will not be the cool girl. So yeah, like that is there, especially for girls and women, because we also have these extra pressure
yeah,
uh just because we're women and that's it.
well, yeah. We
Just
have to be
that.
perfect at all times. We are just here to make the world a more beautiful place, don't you know?
Yeah.
Just objects to decorate. That's it.
Definitely, yes. And then don't forget to be the perfect mom
Yes.
and, to have the perfect career and be the perfect homemaker.
Uh,
It's
yeah.
exhausting.
It is exhausting. And I think like we're still trying to find our way with all of that, like, and letting go of that guilt, you know, like of not doing all the things, you know, and not doing them all perfectly. And it's okay if you don't do a home cooked meal every night. I mean, I don't just, but you
Yeah.
know, what you have to work and do all these things. Yeah, it's
And then like being like, for example, I'm neurodivergent, my children are neurodivergent, and when we are both dysregulated, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like I really need to take a break, me time, whatever. And then the guilt comes because then you are like, oh my gosh, I should know better because I'm like them. Like we have the same in my house. We normally have like the same sensory needs, more or less.
yeah.
So, and then you have like that extra guilt, that you should be there all the time. You should be there for them, like perfectly regulated all the time. And it's so difficult. And it's
Yeah.
not fair for us.
No, we're human beings also. It's like
Yeah,
nobody, I don't think, is regulated all the time. It's like we live in a really stressful world. Like we're all
there you go. Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
it's very normal, not, you know, not to feel that stress and express that stress. But I think that's where I think for a lot of us though, it's literally because we spent our whole lives like putting other people's needs ahead of our own.
Yeah.
That idea of self-care, it's so alien. Like even now, I know all the stuff. I know all the trauma. I know all. I'm like, I know this stuff's important. I will have like a 2 or 3 month cycle where I'm like really looking after myself. I'll start each day, think mindfulness or yoga or something, and I'm like a different person and eating well and doing all the right things. And then, oh, all these stresses come in and all these different things. And it's like I then have another 2 or 3 week month cycle of not minding myself. You know, but it's, yeah, like there's just so much, I think, involved in that. But I think underneath a lot of that for us is kind of thinking we don't deserve that self-care. I think step one is kind of acknowledging that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then setting a good example for our children as well,
Yeah.
because, if they see us minding ourselves and put
Yeah.
that as a priority, they will learn that eventually. So
Oh,
that
yeah.
is very important.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have like brain breaks and people breaks in our house. And I suppose I work at home as well. So like there was this thing that like once I left the office, somebody might like start talking to me in the hall and I was like, I actually like I'm still thinking about the thing I was just doing in the office. I need like time to come out of this like transition from there to here. I'm physically in the hall now or in the kitchen, but
Yeah.
my mind is still here. And I think like that it's just that's really good for your kids to see. It's
Yeah.
yeah, I need processing time or or whatever. Yeah, because they probably don't see it in a lot of spaces, do they? Like if we
No, they
can.
don't, definitely. So it's really important that we give them those examples.
And
So
it's fun,
before
like, if
before
we
moving on to the other question, just something that I wanted to ask you about your school times and when you were a child. Do
yeah.
you remember your sensory needs at school? Like, do
Uh,
you remember feeling overwhelmed because
I
of the environment from the sensory point of view?
I remember like school jumpers, like
Uh-huh.
particularly after the summer when you had like worn t-shirts all summer and then you had to put on these prickly, that's what it felt like, a prickly woolly jumper. Because I think we had short sleeve blouses and then this prickly knitted
Oh,
like
yeah.
wool jumper. So it was just be prickling you. And then I had a thing with my shoes when I was really young, like probably preschool, where one shoe always felt different to the other and it drove me nuts, like the feeling of them not being the same, feeling different. And obviously because one foot is bigger than the other slightly, everybody.
I have exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it for me, getting shoes it's a big deal.
Yeah, like I'm fine now. Do you still
No, I still have it.
oh
I now I change into barefoot shoes. I don't know if you
yeah,
are
yeah,
familiar
yeah,
with those, and they changed my life literally because this was like an obsession, and I could feel like
yes,
so I never got the right size. So whether they were too short, like too small for me in one foot, or too large, and that now with barefoot shoes, like I feel like, actually they can, my feet are really
yeah.
comfy and they can spread, the toes can spread and everything. And it changed my life. Oh, my camera just, I'm
Wow, wow,
back. So yeah,
yeah, it's
and I
fine.
feel like school, it's a very harsh environment for children from that point of view. And
Yeah,
that's why I wanted to ask you that. Yeah.
yeah, and you see, there was like I went to school in like primary school in the 80s, and yeah, a bit of the 90s, and like our school had our classroom that I was in for 3 years, say like with that teacher, we were in prefabs, like we weren't in the main school building, so
Hmm.
like the heating was like it was always cold. So I suppose when I think back about it, it's like we used to get up and do our exercises like jumping jacks and all this kind
Oh,
of stuff
really?
to keep warm, to keep warm.
Well, that was good for moving,
So
to having some
yeah,
movement.
you see, so that's it. I was like things that happen. It's kind of like before duvets were invented, before duvets came to Ireland anyway. Like we all had like layers of blankets, so it was like there was weight in all those
Oh,
blankets,
yeah.
and your parents would tuck you in really tight. So like, and the tighter the better. And then the blankets disappeared and all these duvets came in. And I remember the first night under a duvet just going, this feels so weird because it was weightless. It didn't feel like
Yeah.
anything.
Oh my gosh, I
So
never thought about that. But yeah, I remember when I was little, I loved it. And there were like lots of blankets and it was really heavy. I could feel
yeah,
the weight. Yeah.
yeah,
And now we have to buy weighted blankets.
exactly.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, so there was, I mean, there was, and obviously things like lighting. I used to get headaches from whiteboard or blackboards and or the light shining off the blackboards and the
Mm.
fluorescent lights, and even just distractions and things where we had projectors, and just like they would have been like 80s machinery, the noise still coming off the
Yeah.
projector. and the light, and then you'd see all the dust in the classroom because the light would be,
Oh yeah, you
projecting.
see the dust, yeah,
So
floating.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's so annoying.
So there's loads of things, and smell of certain foods and all that kind of stuff. But like, yeah, and milk. We had so we had, the milk. There was like some scheme. I don't think they do it anymore in schools now, but like the I think a CMP, or I don't know, Dawn Dairies, whatever they were, used to deliver the milk to the school in
Uh-huh.
milk bottles. And as well as having like no heating in the prefabs, or heating that one didn't work half the time, there was also no refrigerator. So the crates of milk for the school used to be like left sit
Yeah.
outside, and then someone would bring it around to the classrooms. So this milk had been sitting there for
Oh
like,
no.
yeah. I mean, I used drink milk at one point, and then it actually just turned me off because I'd be looking at this like big lump of cream at the top of the bottle, and I just stopped drinking milk. I was like, no, this is disgusting. So yeah, there was loads of things going on in primary school.
Oh wow, quite different to the ones that children have nowadays, but but still, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that is something very common. And there's like, I feel like there's so many changes that we could make, like, at school, and it's not that difficult, or doesn't imply a lot of costs sometimes.
no,
It's
no,
just, change the mindset and be open to make these little changes that for children are really, really important. And at the end of the day, it's not just for neurodivergent children, it's for all the children because we all have sensory needs. So,
absolutely. That's the thing. We're all sensory beings. We all have
yeah,
sensory needs, and every room is a sensory room. But like, I know what you're saying. I totally agree with that. That's the thing. It's like you do not need a big budget. You do not need to go out and spend thousands on equipment or any of these things. But the mindset bit is actually more difficult for people because that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot to dismantle what you believe and what you think, and to reimagine and change how you communicate, and see children in a different way.
yeah,
That's hard work. And I think that's why going out and buying the equipment and ticking a box is actually easier sometimes for people.
yeah, definitely. So sorry that my camera, it's not working. I don't know why, but well, these are the things with technology. I'm back. But yeah, definitely. Like
Oh, always fun with.
yeah, just these little examples. For example, the way that, they change children's seats every 2 weeks, for example, right? That for my child,
Yeah,
nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. And I try to explain the importance in this, and the effects that has on him, not only sensory wise, but emotionally,
yeah,
it feels like, oh, this is, the typical mom that thinks that, her child is the only one in the world. And it's not, it's a big deal. And it
yeah.
affects
It's
a
a big
lot.
deal. Yeah, I think that's it. It's just like the same thing doesn't affect all the children in the same way.
Yeah.
You know, yes, another kid will look forward to finding a new partner or sitting somewhere else or whatever. Someone else mightn't be bothered at all, and then for someone else, it can be actually like anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the reward systems and stuff. Like,
Oh, yeah.
kids can get really anxious about this kind of stuff, and it's so damaging. And also, like, what's the point? But again, it's kind of just people not realizing the impact that this is having, because from on the child, and seeing things and never asking the child.
No, no,
And
no. Never, never. They just decide and that's it. And there are little things that we just, if we are mindful of, how we are communicating with the children as teachers, and we try to plan with them, right? And include them on the decisions that we take, obviously the ones that they can be included, right?
yeah,
It will make so much difference. They're very tiny things that we could do, and it will make like world of difference for them.
absolutely.
Things like the rules. There's some rules, like another one with one of my children. He needs to wear he has a vest that he needs to wear. It's just for safety. Like he feels safer when he's wearing it.
Yeah,
And then, it's this rule at school, like, no coats or no vets allowed in the classroom. It's like, just why? Like, it's not just the fact that you're wearing something, he's wearing his uniform underneath. It's just that for him, it's safety, right? It's regulation. It means a lot. And you have to go through all these hassle in order to get that done, or for them to understand. And this is like, why do we need to try so hard, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I think that's it. It's just like, is this actually a big deal? Like, why are we spending so much time? Like, it's just the system is so rigid, isn't it?
Yeah.
And anything that deviates from it is a big deal, as opposed to, like, actually doesn't really make a difference if a kid wears shoes in the classroom or not. Doesn't make a difference if,
Doesn't make any difference at
it
all.
really, it really doesn't, and I know like some schools will have like in summertime you can wear shorts, but only shorts that are like this color with no stripes and no logo. And I'm like, what's going to happen if there's a stripe down someone's shorts? Like,
Yeah.
really? Like, it's like the world's gonna end. We cannot have stripes down a pair of shorts. It's like this, and people thinking that this is completely normal
Yeah.
thinking, and there's nothing wrong with it, and parents going along with it. And I'm like, what is this? Why do people think this is like
I'm
okay
sorry,
or
some things are ridiculous.
ridiculous? Yeah, imagine
And
putting your time into that. I'm like, what? Like, there's so many other important or fun things you could be doing instead of like writing a policy around what kind of shorts the
yeah,
children will wear.
definitely.
Yeah,
Who wrote that?
yeah, yeah,
Anyway, well, we're gonna move on from schools, otherwise we're gonna be here all day.
yeah,
But yeah, could you tell us a little bit about Ausome Training, please?
yeah, sure.
Such a lovely project.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose it just kind of grew very organically and over the past. I suppose I found out I was autistic 10 years ago. I think I started organizing like probably my first event maybe a year or two after that. Um, I think I organized like a couple of talks in Cork. I had a walk in red event in Bandon, like where I'm living, which was kind of an alternative to Lighted Up Blue at the time. It
Hmm.
was kind of online walk in red, and I was like, well, let's take this offline and actually like, so everyone just like wore red and we went for this little walk over this bridge, and anyways, everything was just, I suppose again, talking about autism acceptance. Interestingly though, because I think back to that point, I didn't realize what autism acceptance was, or neurodiversity or autistic. I thought it was like, no, we need to. And I think lots of people are stuck there actually, or in that part of their journey where you think autism acceptance is about like, yeah, we have this condition, but you need to accept us. You need to accept that like we have these kind of social difficulties, or you need to accept. Whereas now I'm like, no, there's nothing wrong with us. We shouldn't be pathologizing people at all. You need to accept that humans are different and there's no
There
need
you
to be
go.
pathologizing. So it's just, yeah, actually, now that I mention it, it's like that point for me. I'm like, I didn't fully. We had a big banner, autism acceptance, but I didn't understand. I think what it meant at the time, fully. And yeah, so yeah, I suppose we organized talks like that. I was connecting with other autistic people at the time, and I just felt like there was just nothing from the autistic viewpoint. Like there was just very little. There was very little 10 years ago. Like I probably followed every autistic person on social media at the time, whereas now
Mhm.
there's like thousands. Like
Yeah.
you just can't. So it's just like, which is really cool to see. But yeah, I had I suppose, yeah. And then in 2019, I organized the first conference in Ireland that was like all autistic, like all our presenters were autistic. That was like groundbreaking. Like no one had done it before. And I don't think anyone's done it since, to be honest. We did it again last year, but um, again, it just seemed so obvious. It was like, why are other people speaking like about a condition or about people? Or,
Yes.
I'd go to a conference myself and I'd be like, I don't know, just these experts talking and like saying awful things.
Yeah.
And of course, now they're all changing their narrative and saying different things because they're autistics. They have to. But like, it was kind of unpatrolled area, let's say. There was very few people like speaking out against ABA in Ireland at the time. So I would have I set up like a Facebook page and stuff. And I just used that platform to obviously bring people's attention to things. I had no clue. I really didn't understand social media. I didn't wasn't prepared for the backlash or, just people coming on and telling me I'm a terrible person because I'm saying this, that, and the other. But, I suppose when you're doing something from a good place and you're like, well, ABA is abuse and all these things are abusive and like
Yeah.
why don't more people just know this? And I suppose I learned very quickly about human beings and how humans project their, because the conversations quickly become about you being a bad person as opposed to the topic we're talking about,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and all the trauma triggers and stuff like that. But yeah, so I mean, it just kind of grew. I suppose COVID came then, and it was our second conference was planned, and we had to cancel that, and then it was I didn't know how to use Zoom. I like literally, didn't. I would been
Was it
like,
that because of COVID that you had to cancel?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I suppose, yeah. I mean, I've been like so I was still teaching like my speech and drama classes. I also had set up like classes for autistic kids. So I suppose over the years I've developed my like alternative kind of, I have written books and stuff for kids and training other people in I suppose that creating that space for autistic kids. So I was doing that and organizing the conference and maybe a couple of talks locally and stuff like that. And then COVID came and I was literally just sat there canceling all my classes and canceling the conference and just kind of going, what am I going to do? And then this lovely parent, a lovely mom who'd come to a training I had done in Dublin, contacted me and she was like, Evaleen, you should be on Zoom. You should be like, doing this now, running webinars, doing the kind of training you were doing, do it online. And I was like, I don't even know how to use Zoom. I don't know what a webinar is. And she was so lovely. And she did a call with me and showed me how to use Zoom. And that was literally the start, I suppose, of Ausome Training properly then.
yeah.
Yeah, so we just started running webinars and on all these different topics, and it was really cool because it was like, oh my, now we can talk about all the things we wanted to talk about, and yeah, it just grew and developed. And I suppose 2 years ago, then we started what we call our big courses. Like training for. We have like a 10-day course online. It's over 6 months, but it's 10 days for professionals who work with autistic adults. So we got like a lot of psychologists or psychotherapists or, social care workers or people working in different settings, therapeutic settings, coming to learn more like about how they support autistic adults, which is really cool. And then we developed a beautiful parenting program. So it's a train the trainer program. So like professionals come to us. It doesn't, I mean, they don't have to be professionals. I suppose just lots of people in that role kind of are doing it already. But we've also had like we have a teacher delivering it. We have someone who's a parent and a parent's advocate. They've trained in it. So they come to us, they'll train in Kahoo and they get all the resources and all the ready to go, everything's ready to go, literally all the videos, all the scripts, everything that they need. And then they're delivering that to other parents and it's beautiful. It's like, of course, like why wouldn't a parent get a course that's designed by autistics? And that's the feedback. It's just like I could actually like put myself in my child's shoe. And like, of course, loads of these parents are neurodivergent, whether they realize that or not. So it's just speaking to parents on that level and understanding all the things we talked about, like self-care and all those things that, kind of we don't have other people out there talking about. So yeah, it's love. And then we have two big courses for people who work with children as well. So, it's always growing. We're always doing stuff, too much, I'd say. And then we had our second offline conference last year because obviously with COVID and all the years, people, whatever. So we had a beautiful conference called Minding Autistic Minds. So the focus was on mental health because I think that's where the focus needs to be. I mean, well, look, it needs to be in lots of places, but most of the time, and I suppose that's what we learned, is that we're just explaining trauma to people. Like very little about being autistic. Like you're like, look, we're sensitive. No, besides that, here's all the trauma stuff. Like literally, we just, we'd have all these webinars and we'd be like, what do we call the trauma this week? Okay, let's call it. But that's what, like it's literally explaining the autistic experience of trauma, you know what I mean? And it's that people don't realize that that's actually what they're seeing. And a lot of us don't realize ourselves either, you know, and it's just, I suppose, we really need to do something about the mental health of autistic people.
Yeah.
You know, the stats are just kind of like really hard to read. And yeah, that was a really cool 2 days. We did a day on autistic adults and a day on autistic children's mental health. And it was called a conference. And I mean, it was, you know, but it was just this beautiful space. It was just this really open, I don't know, like the feedback was from people. They were like, I'm autistic. I was in a room with like, I don't know, nearly 200 people. And I didn't feel like I was in a room with that
Yeah.
many people. Like
Wow, that
that's,
is so nice.
yeah, yeah. I think it was just a really accepting, open place. I mean, we're not, you know, when you go to some things and people are like really stuffy and formal and they're like announcing this person and that person, like it was, I don't know, welcome into our space. Here's some stuff. Here's some, it was just relaxed. I think that's it, you know, it's just relaxed. And even though we talk about trauma and all those other, you know, things that aren't easy to talk about, yeah, I think we could still kind of be together and even have some jokes in between, you know? Well, you have to, don't you?
Oh, that's so lovely. So, if someone wants to reach out to Ausome Training, where can they find it?
Yeah, our website is probably the most direct route. It's and it's awesome, AUSOME training.com.
Mhm.
Because yeah, awesome. You know, a play on the word, isn't it? Autistic.
Yeah.
Awesometraining.com, and we're on Facebook, and I'm on LinkedIn, and we're on Instagram, and we're on Twitter as well.
Hmm.
I'm not on TikTok, and I think I'm too old, but people
I know
tell me
TikTok.
you need to get on TikTok. I'm like I don't have anything else to do right now.
Oh, well, I will add that onto the episode description, okay, with all the links and everything. But yeah, there is something that I love about Awesome Training and what you do, and it's the neuroaffirmative approach that is within all of this. I think like that's the key to change.
Yeah,
And it is so important. And that is actually the key to eventually prevent the trauma that we
yes,
all have from feeling different and not having the place and feeling that we have no rights of being different. Right.
yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about the neuroaffirmative approach for those who don't know what it is?
Yeah, and I think the word neuroaffirming kind of came into existence a couple of years ago, and I
Yeah.
think it's probably the best word we've had so far because autistic led and rights based, and I don't things just they weren't. And whereas affirming somebody, I think is a beautiful way to say it. And I suppose maybe I'll just say what it's not first, because some people think it's like, oh, you know, just putting on a rose colored glasses,
Yeah.
set into classes, and thinking, oh, these people, we're all fine, and pretending
Yeah.
that like we don't have challenges or difficulties. So that like that's not what it is.
Mhm.
It's also not just like focusing on someone's strengths and ignoring their weaknesses, because also that's really subjective. Who's to say what's a strength and a weakness? So
Yeah.
it changes, obviously, it's context dependent. So I don't like that framing of it either, even though it's helpful, obviously, to a therapist maybe. You know, and if you're diagnosing a child or assessing a child, of course it's helpful to point out all the wonderful things that they're good at before you say, and actually here's where their difficulties lie. So I get that. But being affirming is actually more than all of that. And I suppose on a very human level, it is, I think, to be truly neuroaffirming, it's about like literally paring back all those layers of bias that we hold towards each other.
Mhm.
You know, like that's what I suppose it is about, affirming that person, their right to be in the world, who they are, that the way they are is right. It's not a deficit. It's not a. Also just a very small difference, because I think we've got to a point now where we're all so different to each other, which I don't think is helpful, because I suppose a lot of what I do is we're actually just kind of like you. You know, when I'm explaining to people, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, any human being could experience these things if they were in this situation, you know. anybody's sensory system can come, be overwhelmed. You just need enough input. And it's just trying to explain things like that, like from a very just human level, and not pitying people because, of disability or anything like that. Like, I mean, that's something that I don't like. Ableism, like, just does not go with neuroaffirming, and yet you'd see people who are saying they're neuroaffirming, but then they still come up with some ableist comment, or, and I find as well that, like, some people think that, like, neuroaffirming means like accepting the good autistics like you and me. Like, we're okay. We're nearly, we're nearly there. We're nearly normal.
The high functioning, no?
Yeah.
That concept.
Yeah, that concept. So, and it's easier, you see, because we're more human, I suppose, than someone who has higher support needs or whatever. In that kind of, obviously, I'm not saying that's what it is, but from someone's perspective, yeah. So there's, yeah, that it's kind of, so yeah, it's not putting a positive spin on something and pretending it doesn't exist, because I think some people think that, and what it really is just. Yeah, like I think it's being trauma informed as well. Like, I think that's a huge part of it. Like, you've got to understand the trauma bits, because I think, and that's where people's difficulty lies. Sometimes we're like, how can we celebrate meltdowns and celebration? We're like, they're trauma responses. I'm not asking you to celebrate those, so you have to, I think, be able to break down and understand, like, what it actually means to be autistic, and what are all the responses to being autistic in a world that has literally kind of trampled on us.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think your definition was very clear, loud and clear.
And long-winded.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like this is the future, this word is gonna help us a lot to understand that we are all human beings. We are all different, and it's okay to have our own space to be different. And there are many ways of doing things, I think that is just the key to all of this. So, Evaleen, I would like to ask you a question that it's very important in my podcast, because, we try to focus on parents as well. So, what advice would you give to parents of neurodivergent children?
Ooh.
I know there are many, but if you have to choose one, well, at least a couple.
Yeah, that's such a, yeah. Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing that parents of autistic children can do is realize that we come from a long line of autistic people, including ourselves. I mean, I do. I think, like, the sooner parents of autistic kids, kind of look at their own identities, maybe, or neurologies. I think that's the key to a lot of this, because traditionally the idea is like this one child, and I know not everybody's biological parents, so I suppose I'm just speaking to this for this moment. But, we're kind of saying this one child in this family is so different to the other, to if they have siblings, and they're so different to the parents. That's just not true. Like, we know now that there's neurodivergent families, and that's really what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably, like, and the most important thing for parents to realize, because that's going to take away a lot of the other stuff, isn't it? And I think as well, it's just like, let go of what other people are saying and thinking, and it doesn't matter, like, what society, like, these rules, that I feel like there's that pressure, as we were saying in the beginning, to follow certain rules, to be this perfect parent, to do all of these things. I think being autistic as well means sometimes we kind of believe a lot of this stuff is happening, whereas it's facade. Do you know what I mean? I'm always like, this isn't real at all. This is just pretend, So, yeah, that, like, our children are amazing, and I don't, all a child wants is to be seen and accepted.
Yeah.
that and to connect with us, like, and I think it's really important because of the high levels of trauma in our community for parents to look after themselves. Like, that's like, if you're stressed, well, what way is your kid going to respond? You know, if you're overwhelmed, overworked, if you're stressed, and that's very easy to say, but you look at all the forms parents have to fill out to get things to
Oh
support
my
their.
gosh,
The
yeah,
system
I
is set
know.
up to stress parents. You know, it's so wrong.
It's less.
But it's just kind of just reframing, ignoring like what other people are saying about your child, basically, and trust yourself. We all, like, it's your own child, you know. You are perfectly capable, I think, of parenting your child. I think, because I think that's what, not just parents of neurodivergent kids, just parenting in general. There's so many experts out there. And if you buy all the books, they'll all contradict each other, telling us to do this and do that. And it's like, actually, at the end of the day, we have instincts, as like, you know, we've kept each other alive. Parents have kept their children alive for millennia. Why do we suddenly need books? You know, I know alive shouldn't be the like standard, hopefully more than that. But like, you know, again, it's just people's opinions on stuff, which will be outdated and changed in 10 years' time, you know? And a lot of these books are based on, I don't, like, a friend of mine has a baby recently, and she's like, oh, I'm reading this book, and, you know, baby's a boy, and, you know, when he turns 4 now, he'll like be in some new phase and he'll want to spend more time with his dad. And I'm like, that's just like utter bullshit, if I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah, you're allowed.
What if you're like a one-parent family? Like, what does the kid do? I was like, that's like just not a thing. That's just like someone who had too much time on their hands and just like made up this stuff. You know, because there's so much stuff out there. There is, you know, so it's just like, we're human. Do your own thing. Do your own thing. That's
Just
fine. One
parent
line
the
of
child that
advice.
you have, right?
Yeah. And yeah, I'm like, comparing your child to other children, like, just for what? For what? Why?
Mm,
There's no point. Like,
no.
what? No, none at all, you know, none at all. You know, and I just think, yeah, look for communication. Like, kids are always communicating with us, you know? And I think that's really important, because there's so much around like kids who don't speak or can't speak or whatever, you know, say, oh, they don't communicate. I'm like, of course they do. Of course, you
Yeah,
know?
sometimes people think that because they are not expressing themselves through words, they
Yeah,
don't hear, they don't understand, or they're not intelligent, or they
yeah,
don't communicate. And it's just, again, keeping our minds open and just, be creative. I always say, like, you know, if you add a little bit of creativity to the way you parent, and the way you're there for your children, that will help a lot. And then just your instincts as well. And
yeah,
as you said, like, we're talking about neurodivergent families.
yeah,
So when you start just doing what works for your family, just, yeah,
yeah.
it's much better.
Much better, you
Yeah.
know, much better. And I think just for people to be careful where they get their information. You know, I think that's it. I think people can very quickly go down rabbit holes on the internet, or into like really toxic groups where people are mourning their children and trying to fix them and cure them, and at any cost, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's just really important that you just seek out informed voices, or autistic voices, or neuroaffirming voices, on any of this stuff, you know. And there's just so many people out there sharing advice and sharing stories and sharing, you know, that they're just, we're surrounded by really good information, I think, you
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
definitely. Definitely. Okay, well, this is our last question, and it's kind of a tradition in our podcast. So, just going back to before you started all this journey in the neurodivergent world, what advice would you give to a other person that you wish someone had given you,
Oh, ooh.
back then when you didn't know anything about this?
You mean when you're trying to figure it out?
Yes.
Yeah, I
Like,
think,
now, with all the knowledge you have
yeah.
about this, think about back then. Imagine there's someone right now in front of you in that, moment.
um, I
What would
think
you?
I think because on just, there's a huge fear I think when we find out we're autistic in adulthood, of what's underneath all these masks. And I don't like the term masking. I don't think it's probably probably the best way to describe what we're doing. I actually used to call it fortressing, like literally building these walls between you and other people, or cardboard versions of yourself to protect, your true self or your inner self or whatever word you want to call it. And there's a fear sometimes, like, well, if I start taking all these masks away, like, will I like what's underneath? What is underneath? And how, and I suppose, I think it's just, think when you've spent your entire life protecting this very precious thing, this very precious you, of course it's worth protecting. It's going to be something beautiful, but there is that kind of fear of the unknown, isn't there, with a lot of people? So I think that's it. I think it's just like, it is a roller coaster, put on your seatbelt, but go gently, go gently. And I think the biggest thing that comes with, finding out you're autistic or whatever in your adulthood is that kind of just not, you stop beating yourself with a stick, actually a lot of stuff was just not your fault, and there's a lot of letting go. Yeah.
And it's such a relief, right? Once you accept, who you are, and I remember feeling like, I was just taking all this weight back from my, it was like, I felt lighter. It's just feel free to be who you truly are and accept yourself.
Accept it. And just start doing stuff that you would not have done before. Do you remember the thrill of like, I just did that, like something you didn't do? Like for a few years, if I was talking to my husband, I'd be like, see, before now I would have, and I kept comparing to like what I would have done before, because there was all these lovely like new experiences and new ways of doing things, and maybe just even if that was exploring boundaries or whatever. It's just like, oh, I wouldn't have done that before. I would have offered to do something else. I wouldn't have said no, and it's just like, and then it becomes your normal, and it's so lovely. And then there's always layers. You think you're done,
but you're never done.
Oh, you're like, oh, look, something else is coming up. Who knew?
Definitely, yeah. Oh, well, this was lovely. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and be so open about it.
You're so welcome.
Lovely.
Thank you for having me. Really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. And then we will add all your information on the description, so people who wants to reach out, they know where to find you. Thank you so much.
You're really welcome. And let me know when it's ready and I can share it as well. And
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Evaleen.
Thanks a million.